Ladies and gentlemen, this is the beginning of heavy metal. Pretty sure this is my favorite solo Beatles album. This is something different, and it's amazing. One of the greatest musicians ever. My name is Joe. These are just opinions. I am Joepinionated. Welcome to the 25 best albums of 1970. Number 25 comes from David Bowie. In my opinion, his first masterpiece, The Man Who Sold the World. Well, maybe not quite masterpiece level. I got it 3.75 stars. His coming out party. I think really the lead single on the album too is just amazing. Towards the end of the album, The Man Who Sold the World, incredible. A great sign of things to come from one of the greatest artists of the 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000s, David Bowie. Number 24 comes from Canadian band Guess Who, and their album in 1970 is American Woman. Another one I got at 3.3 and three quarter stars. They have two albums this year. Share the Land is also great, but I love the album American Woman. The track No Sugar Tonight, I remember Burton Cummins talking about that on Much Music here in Canada. I believe he said the story was that some biker dude wanted to beat him up at a show, and he started chasing him down the sidewalk. I think it was somewhere in the prairies, and the biker dude's girlfriend said, "You better not do that, or there'll be no sugar tonight." And Burton Cummings was so stoked that he went inside and wrote a song about it, not getting beat up. Classic rock, hard rock, blues rock. Up next from their fourth of five albums, The Velvet Underground. Their album from 1970 is Loaded. Once again, three and three quarter stars for Loaded. This one has Oh Sweet Nothing. This one has Mary Jane. This one is great. It's a great album, start to finish. 1970's got a lot of great albums. So in a lot of years, this probably would have finished a lot higher. Anyways, I got to hear. This is some of Lou Reed's best work, some of his best vocals on this album. Number 22 is the debut record from Little Feat. It's Feat, homage to the Beatles and to talking about Lowell George's Little Feat, self-titled album. A few Little Feat episodes on his channel. This is probably my least favorite of the Lowell George years. It's the most unpolished. Lowell's arm, I believe, was injured during the recording of this album. And I think that Ry Cooder steps in a little bit to fill in on some slide guitar work. This is kind of like David Bowie, real sign of major things to come in the coming years. I got Little Feat self-titled at number 22. Up next, I'm going with Rodriguez, Cold Fact. Got that three and three quarter stars as well. Sugar Man. That documentary just blew my friggin' mind. What a crazy documentary. I got to talk to Rupert G, the guy who runs Rupert's Deli outside of David Letterman. I told him about this movie when I was in New York one time, about the movie Searching for Sugar Man. And yeah, then listened to the album afterwards, saw it on the shelves. Fantastic record. I get what all the hype was about. Really cool documentary. I get guaranteed to blow your mind if you don't know the story. Guaranteed. Up next, number 20 comes from Cat Stevens, T for Tillerman. I got it three and three quarter stars. Great album. I didn't grow up with it. The only reason I sort of knew it as a kid was because of the Wonder Years. That I did get this on vinyl early when I started collecting vinyl. Beautiful album. I knew quite a few of the tracks before I, put the vinyl down. I was like, okay, yeah, gonna show up again on the top 25 songs list. Remember, there's a playlist on the channel for 100 top 150 songs for each year that I deep dive into. So there's one for this year, 1970, on the channel Joepinionated. That's at my friend Joe on YouTube. Number 19, we move into four-star territory. Canadian folk icon, legend from lives around here, I believe. I'm on the west coast here, Canada. From Joni Mitchell, her album is Ladies of the Canyon. This is kind of the Joni that I really like. I really like the early 70s Joni. I mean, I'm not alone, obviously, on that, but kind of this more folky stuff. The jazzier albums, I'm yet to kind of really get into or understand, really. But I think that maybe by listening to them in order, it'll settle in a bit more. Up next, first appearance on my deep dives, Beach Boys and their 1970 album Sunflower. Great album, well produced. The Beach Boys sound great on this album. I don't know what to tell you. Beach Boys are kind of the king of the '60s. They're up there in Beatles talk on some years. And yeah, who doesn't like I think this album's full of them. I grew up with Full House and stuff like that too. That song Forever, that's on this album, but just great production, pretty stuff. Up next, 4 stars for Elton John, Tumbleweed Connection, 1970. He had a couple albums in 1970, the self-titled as well. So this is, I believe, his third album, Tumbleweed Connection. This one's got more like a country twang, like the band kind of sound to a lot of these songs. A lot of roots rock, country rock. Awesome album, start to finish. One of my favorite Elton John albums. I knew all the greatest hits, and I thought I knew Elton John, and I thought that was it. And when I start listening to the albums from 1970 to 1975, boy oh boy, this guy could write a song. Lots of great tracks. Ballad of a Well-Known Gun, right off the hop, sets the tone for this album. It rocks. It rocks hard. Number 16 comes from Legends, The Grateful Dead. They had another album this year too, Working Man's Dead, but their second album of the year, I think, is probably their greatest album, and it's American Beauty. The other one, Working Man's Dead, has Casey Jones, which is definitely one of my favorite Grateful Dead tracks. I really love Friend of a Devil, Sugar Magnolia, Ripple, Truckin'. Pretty good stuff. Friend of the Devil has some of my favorite lyrics, country rock, folk songs of ever. Friend of the Devil. Jerry Garcia is so tasty on this. Yeah, anyways, the whole band is just firing on all cylinders at this point, and I totally understand why people are obsessed with the Grateful Dead. Up next, it's the debut album from Parliament. Osmium, Funkadelic, Parliament. There's albums every year pretty much from 70 to 80. This one has Bernie Worrell on it, Eddie Hazel and George Clinton, Billy Bays, Tiki, Full Force. I like this album more than the Funkadelic album of this year. There was just a re-release, I believe, last year on Record Store Day for this album. Really wish I got a copy. This one also has some great tracks on it. I love My Automobile, later on featured in, I believe it's Easy E. Moonshine Heather, Little One Country Boy. It's funky. It's Parliament. These guys are kings. Number 14 comes from another legend, James Brown. How many albums this guy got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. From his 27th album, Ain't It Funky. His 27th album, Ain't It Funky, from James Brown. Honestly, one of my very favorites. He puts out, 4 albums this year? 3 the year prior? Or 4 the year prior? 4 the year prior. I mean, James Brown firing on all cylinders at this point, but Ain't It Funky? One of the funkiest, one of the best. I love this era. I love Hot Pants. I love 1967 to 1973 James Brown. He knows what he's doing. The guy knows what he's doing. Get back. Ain't it funky now? That's all it is. It's like, yeah, okay. Ain't it funky? The whole album. It kicks off, gets in the groove, and keeps the funky going. The whole thing. Ain't it funky? Yeah, it is. It is James. It's funky. One of my favorite James Brown. Well, there's so many great James Brown things. I love when he pulls Michael Jackson up on the stage. Obviously, him, getting the cape thrown on him, black and white, back in whatever that was, the tall, whatever show. But also, I love Paul Schaefer talking about his greatest moment on Dave Letterman history was when James Brown came on the show. It was that 12-minute performance or whatever, 15-minute performance. Incredible. And the band is just so happy. Next up, another 4-star album here. Another guy that's been featured a few times, Desert Island Playlist and Greatest Songs, Harry Nilsson, and the album is Nilsson Sings Newman. So Harry Nilsson decided he's going to make an album about singing a bunch of Randy Newman, who was kind of an unknown at the time, cover songs, and it's amazing. Each song better than the original, and I really love Randy Newman after listening to this album. This is the album that made me a Randy Newman fan. Now I own a whole whack of Randy Newman albums, and they get spun a lot. Harry Nilsson, inspired the Beatles in many ways. Was their favorite group at one point. The documentary is so incredible about Harry. I've talked about it to death on this channel. Standouts: Living Without You, Dayton, Ohio, 1903, Love Story, I'll Be Home. I mean, the whole album is gorgeous. Harry Nilsson, one of the greatest singers of all time, period. Singing Randy Newman, one of the greatest lyricists and arrangers of all time. Pretty good combo, pretty great album. Okay, bumping it up 4.25 stars for number 12 album of 1970, going with McCartney. Paul McCartney. They all come out of the gates hot in 1970. The Beatles, officially make it official. They're done. Last Beatles works are released, and here come the solo albums. And Paul McCartney, this is one of my favorite McCartney albums. There's a few. I'm kind of kicking myself because before I did this deep dive, I actually got rid of this album. I used to have this on wax. I don't anymore. I'm gonna go buy back my old record again. Can't say it would be the first time. Standout tracks. I love Junk. Man, Me Was Lonely. Teddy Boy. Maybe I'm Amazed. Paul McCartney. McCartney. Self-titled. McCartney. Up next, the jazz fusion masterpiece from Miles Davis, Bitches Brew. Once again, I got 4.25 stars. The reason is because I've listened to a lot of Miles Davis, and I've got a lot of respect for a lot of his other albums more than Bitches Brew. Huge fan. I mean, I was thinking about it earlier today, actually, who the greatest trumpet player of all time is. It's hard. Trumpet's a hard one because you've got a few masters involved. Louis Armstrong, clearly the master for the first 40 years of jazz. As far as like inspirational, he was head of the class for the first. He was the Wayne Gretzky for the first 40 years of jazz, and then you get the bop scene coming on. You get the Charlie Parker, or you get Dizzy Gillespie, the Charlie Parker combination there, and Miles is kind of birthed out of that as well. And Miles goes on for the longest and does the most going forward, inspired by a Sly and the Family Stone concert at one point, and kind of switched into this jazz fusion thing and went all psychedelic and avant-garde jazz funk. Bitches Brew's fantastic. It's just not my favorite Miles Davis album. I don't know if it's top 10 even, really. As much as it's a fantastic album, Miles Davis, if we're talking Miles Davis, we're talking one of the greatest musicians ever, and he's in that crew of people. Anyways, Bitches Brew is a fantastic record. If you've never heard it, it was one of those ones I heard a long time ago because it was, cool to know it. It had bitches in the title, when I was a teenager and I heard this album. It was one of my first Napster albums. It just sounds bizarre, but I, was really into finally getting to hear all these albums I've heard so much about. So anyways, Bitches Brew, one that I've never actually owned on wax, so I do look forward to one day securing a nice copy. I'd like to get a nice copy of Bitches Brew. All right, number 10 comes from Black Sabbath. It's their debut album, Black Sabbath, from 1970. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the beginning of heavy metal. I've listened to the Deep Purple albums. I've listened to the other stuff that might be heavy metal. It's not. This is where it starts, is this album right here. Black Sabbath, Black Sabbath. End of fucking story. Led Zeppelin is not heavy metal. Okay. These other bands, they're heavy at times. This is something different. It's incredible too. And then the one thing that people always kind of lump Black Sabbath, this genre into like Satanism and all that sort of stuff. Really thoughtful lyrics on a lot of those stuff. It's so monumental. Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of fucking Darkness, opens up with Black Sabbath, one of the coolest songs. I think better than the opening to Zeppelin one. I think this is a better opening track. Okay, I'm not saying they're better than Led Zeppelin. Just saying these guys came on the gate with that. The second song is The Wizard. The fourth song is NIB. Anyway, sorry, great album. We got number 9 comes from The Band, their third album, Stage Fright, engineered by Todd Rundgren. Rest in peace, Garth Hudson, the fifth member of the band, passed away earlier this year. Final living member, Garth Hudson, Canadian legend. Also, Robbie Robertson passed away since I made band episodes on this channel. Rest in peace to both. There's many photos of you guys on the walls of my house. One of my favorite bands, period. The Band. I've read all their books. I own all their albums. I love it. And Stage Fright, their third best album. Northern Cross, I guess, is in the conversation, but for me, it's Stage Fright all day long for the third best album from these guys. And the first side is cool. Get Time to Kill. but for me, it's all about the second side. You know, the shape I'm in, W.S. Walcott's Medicine Show, Stage Fright, and close out the rumor, one of my favorite sort of underdog songs from the band. Some of Robbie Robertson's best work on the rumor. Same with Garth Hudson. So check that track out if you haven't heard it. Unbelievable. I love watching them recording this album. Up next, we jump to 4.5 stars. It's their fifth album from Creedence Clearwater Revival. The album's called Cosmo's Factory. They have 7 albums, I believe, total. Break up just a couple years later. This album opens with Ramble Tamble, Looking Out My Back Door, Run Through the Jungle, Up Around the Bend, We'll Stop the Rain, Heard It Through the Grapevine, Long as I Can See the Light. I don't know. Were these guys using AI back in 1970 to just throw out ridiculous hooks over and over again? These guys have we have the greatest hits of these guys, and not a single song falls flat. 20, 25 songs. I love the recordings. I love Fogerty's voice. I love his guitar. I love the drums. I love this band. Up next, another 4.5 star album from another ex-Beatle at this point, George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. This album, it's a triple album. George Harrison really could have turned this into, all of his albums for the 70s, because he has so many hits on this album, ready to show the world that he's great at singing and songwriting on his own. And he does. He just does. The whole thing is chock full of 4+ star songs. It's an incredible album. It could easily be number one. And I'm sure it is on many, many lists. Number 7, because it's 1970. There's just so much good stuff to go in there. I could list off every song on the album as being potentially the best song on the album. It's that good. All right, number 6 comes from Black Sabbath, their second album of the year, their second album ever. It's 4.5 stars. It's Paranoid. You thought the first one had some heavy metal riffage hooks, all time riffs, heavy metal riffs. We ain't seen nothing yet, because these guys get better over the first few albums. It opens up with War Pigs, some of the best lyrics, one of the craziest songs. The second song on the album, it's the one maybe you've heard of it, Paranoid. You've probably seen it 1,000 times. It was on the Dazed and Confused soundtrack. It's on everything. It's a song that only these 4 guys can make. A song that only Ozzy can sing. You got Iron Man, Electric Funeral, Hand of Doom, Fairies Wear Boots to close out the album, Planet Caravan. Black Sabbath is awesome. Number 6, 4.5 stars, so it's in a however many tie for second place, really. It's Neil Young's third studio album after the Gold Rush. At number 5 for 1970. Once again, another album you see at number 1 on many lists, and for good reason. It's one of Neil's best albums. It's his first great album and first of many great albums. Pretty much knocks out of the park every album of the 70s. For me, anyways, I love them all. Tell Me Why, After the Gold Rush, Only Love Can Break Your Heart, Southern Man, Till the Morning Comes, Till the Morning Comes. Don't Let It Bring You Down. Good God, buy this record if you don't own it. I love how you can you can almost hear the crackling wood fires on some of his albums in the background and stuff like that. It's just such a warm environment, such a warm feeling, such a well produced album. And one of the coolest guys on the planet in 1970 is Neil Young, and one of the coolest guys on the planet in 2025 is Neil Young, Canadian legend. And he's doing a big world tour again here in North America. He's doing a big tour this year, which is great. Hope he plays a lot of songs off of After the Gold Rush. Number 4 comes from an ex-Beatle, John Lennon, with his debut solo album, Plastic Ono Band. Okay, technically it's not his debut solo album because the wedding album did come out first, but anyways, whatever. Plastic Ono Band. John created a Plastic Ono Band because he didn't want it to be something. He wanted it to be, plastic or changeable, malleable. The lineup. I'm pretty sure this is my favorite solo Beatles album. It's totally different. Some of his other stuff might have better production value. It is a little tinny on some of the tracks. Some of it sounds a little lo-fi, which is bizarre, but that's just kind of the stage in his life he was at. So much emotion, so much, Mother obviously opening the album, Working Class Hero, I Found Out, Isolation, Remember, God, one of my favorite tracks. Incredible. incredible from one of the greatest lyricists of all time, and quite possibly my favorite solo artist, Beatles solo artist is John Lennon. Plastic Ono Band, I love it. I'm certainly a fan. Number three comes from the combination of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young with their first and one of their only albums, Déjà Vu. The four were together here. They're together at Woodstock earlier the year prior. Really up there with the Beatles albums and the Led Zeppelin albums as being next to damn perfect. The harmonies, arguably the best harmonies. Like Everly Brothers level stuff going on here with the grit of Neil Young, the songwriting prowess of Graham Nash, Stills, and Crosby. These guys know their way around songwriting, singing, playing, texture. It's just one of the prettiest albums ever. Helpless is, probably my favorite Neil Young performance in the early 70s. Teach Your Children, almost got my hair cut. Almost cut my hair. Sorry. Our House, Deja Vu, Carry On. So yeah, Neil Young cracks the top five twice. Cracks the top five twice. At number two, we're jumping up to 4.75 stars. Almost perfect. We're going with the Beatles' final album, Let It Be. So yeah, so the Beatles broke up 1970, and Paul had already put out his solo album, and this thing got kind of finished up with the help of Phil Spector. To Paul's dismay, he never liked the way it was mixed. I don't really either. Then 2003, they came out with Let It Be Naked. That was amazing. And I bought a copy and I've never looked back. I don't normally even listen to this version, but the songs are still there. Two of Us, Dig a Pony, Across the Universe, I Me Mine, Let It Be, I Got a Feeling, One After 909, Along the Windy Road, For You Blue, and Get Back are bangers. Straight up. I'm tired of people making fun of this album. Tired of people putting this album down. It's only because of the Beatles. Any other band released this album, it's the greatest band that any other band ever released, period. The lyrics to Across the Universe are to die for. I love the stripped back version on Let It Be Naked. Two of Us, an important song to me, one of my favorite early, getting into the Beatles. I Me Mine. Obviously, Let It Be is just an all time. I Got a Feeling. I love that Beatles documentary that came out, the one that Jeff Jackson did. Jeff Jackson? Is Jeff Jackson the basketball coach? Peter Jackson, the one Peter Jackson did. I get to see a lot of these songs getting worked on in the documentary. What a day that was. I couldn't imagine being, it's like the Boston Red Sox fans that died just before they won the World Series, Beatles fans who passed away before that Peter Jackson documentary came out. I feel bad for them. Cause that's like that how it's just changes your level of love for the Beatles watching that thing, for me anyways. And it just got way better. I always had this sort of negative feelings about how they ended and stuff like that, and I don't anymore. Let It Be is a great album, one of the greatest, and I got it tied for first place for 1970. Comes in at number two, just behind number one, which is the third album from Led Zeppelin in 2 years, the third album in 2 years, and it's called Led Zeppelin III. Zeppelin IV comes out the following year. Zeppelin III is more of like a stripped back sound, a lot of acoustic guitars on it. And we have a Led Zeppelin Desert Island playlist episode on this channel. I suggest you check that out, where we do some major deep diving into Zepp and our favorite tracks. And a lot of them come from this album. This album pretty important to my buddy Trist, as the first cassette Zeppelin that he owned. Once again, list off every song since I've been loving you: Immigrant Song, Friends, Celebration Day, Out on the Tiles, Gallows Pole, Tangerine, That's the Way, Bonjour, Stomp, and Hats Off to Roy Harper. So you've got whatever, 9 out of 10 are amazing songs from Led Zeppelin, one of the greatest hard rock bands of all time, one of the greatest bands of the 70s, if not the greatest. And 1970, you guys growing up in 1970, you are very, very lucky, because there's some mind-blowing stuff going on in the world in 1970, the world of music. So yeah, number one, Led Zeppelin 3 from Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, John Bonham, and Jimmy Page. So that's it for 1970 top 25 albums. Some of my lowest rated albums for the year were Sid Barrett's Madcap Laughs, Beach Boys Live in London, Tim Buckley's Star Sailor, Chicago. I'm not a big Chicago fan. I can't get with that. Deep Purple's album from 1970 either. Sorry. I wasn't crazy about New Morning from Bob Dylan. Not to pick on those. Those just happen to be at the bottom of my list for the albums I ranked. Remember, again, there's a playlist on the channel. Songs episode for 1970 coming up next. Hundreds, thousand episodes on my channel, so check them out. Remember to live and let live. Go ahead and smash that like. Go ahead and buy me a coffee or whatever, and a thanks button down there, and let me know what you'd like me to dive on next. Movies, music, nothing serious, no politics. I'm sorry, I'm a little low on facts and high on opinions. Respect to the greatest album of 1970, Led Zeppelin III, and we out.